President Trump looking to hammer out a deal to end the war in Ukraine. You're looking live now at both the White House and Moscow this morning. President Trump is set to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the phone after his no-show at last week's peace talks. The president also set to speak with Volodymyr Zelenskyy and NATO leaders. Those high-stakes calls coming on the heels, though, of Russia launching its largest drone attack since the war began. NewsNation's Tom Dempsey live at the White House with a preview this morning. Tom, how confident is the administration feeling about today's phone call?
Hey, good morning from the White House, Markie. Well, Special Envoy to President Trump, Steve Witkoff, says he believes these calls today will be very successful. Those calls with Russian leader Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy happening in just a few hours here at the White House. And President Trump has been very clear. He wants this war in Ukraine to come to an end, and soon. And he says any sort of direct talks with Vladimir Putin could be very critical to that effort. Also consider the timing of these calls happening today. This comes just a day after Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio met face-to-face with Vladimir Zelenskyy on the sidelines of Pope Leo XIV's first papal mass at the Vatican. Zelensky's office says he thanked the U.S. for its aid, but also said he believes Russia does not want to end the war. The first direct peace talks between Russia and Ukraine in 3 years took place in Turkey just last week, but at a much lower level than the U.S. hoped, as President Putin did not make the trip to sit down with Zelenskyy. Secretary Rubio now believes today's phone calls could be very critical.
On the one hand, we're trying to achieve peace and end a very bloody, costly, and destructive war. So there's some element of patience that is required. On the other hand, we don't have time to waste. So we don't want to be involved in this process of just endless talks. There has to be some progress, some movement forward.
Now, those peace talks in Turkey last week did result in Ukraine and Russia exchanging 1,000 prisoners of war each. But Ukraine has accepted a 30-day temporary ceasefire. But on the other hand, Russia has not. Again, adding to that crucial nature of these phone calls happening today, Markie.
And Tom, these talks also come after a bloody weekend of attacks in Ukraine. What more are we learning about those strikes?
Well, this war very much raging on in Europe as we speak right now, Markie, to the point that Russia actually conducted what it's believed to be the largest drone strike since this war began 3 years ago. Scenes show the destruction in areas like Kyiv and Ukraine and other areas around the country. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia launched over 270 drones, again, hitting areas in Kyiv and regions to the east. At least one person was killed, while 3 others were injured. Again, the attacks adding to the urgency of all this with these ceasefire talks happening in just a few hours here at the White House. We also know that President Trump will also be conducting some phone calls with NATO leaders as well later today, Markie.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.